wanted to just personally thank all you guys for your generosity financially, because, prayers are great. We love prayers, but sometimes we need to proceed after we pray. And you guys have stepped out financially, and I thank you guys for it. And, that's going to be such a blessing up there when it's finished. And then we're working our way downstairs and get all that done for the kids. And so this is our church. This is our church. Yesterday when I was here, I was thinking about people that will come to our church and they will come to a church. And then I was thinking about you guys, that it's not that you're coming to a church, you're coming to your church. And you've stepped out and you've helped and you've donated and you've given and you've prayed and you've been alongside us. And it's so cool to see what the Lord's doing and how it's getting done. So I just wanted to thank you guys. Thank you guys for that. And just ask that you continually partner with us and keep pushing forward in all that we're doing. All right, John chapter 12. We're in a new chapter today. How about that? We finally got out of chapter 11. It was a long chapter, but this week I went golfing on Thursday, and I was out there playing, and probably around the 7th hole, I was like, you know what? I'm done golfing. And you're like, what do you mean, Jason? Like you were done for the day? No. I walked to my ball. This is and my family knows this about me, but I walked to my ball, I picked it up, and I started walking to my car. And I thought, how much can I get for my clubs on eBay? And I'm like going through all of this as I'm walking. Tom's back there having a conniption fit. I'm walking to my car. And Tom, you should have known this about me. He just lost a golf partner. But and he just found out. He's like the one who's last to know. But I'm walking to the car, and I'm like, how much can I get for my clubs on eBay? And, I'm just finished. What am I going to do next? I in the middle of my round, hole number 7, I pick my ball up and I walk off. And as I'm walking off, I see Guy's cousin teeing off on hole number 3 with his brother. And they're laughing because normally when a guy's walking off the course, he's had a bad game. And they're like, hey, what's up, Jason? Rough day, huh? And I'm like, no, I'm done, man. I'm done golfing. And they're like, oh, you were horrible, huh? It was just a bad day. I said, no, man, as soon as I get home, I'm going on eBay and I'm listing my clubs. And they're like, are you serious? And I said, absolutely. I'm finished like that. And he goes, no, you're not. And I said, listen, my membership's up in a few days. I've golfed my guts out. I'm done. I'm selling my junk as soon as I get home. And he's like, well, how much you want for your clubs? And so I broke it down. And he so happened to have cash. And I sold all my clubs right there on hole number 3. I sold my clubs. I sold my driver. I sold my bag, the rangefinder that was in that thing. I said, give me $700 right now. He's all, I'll give you 6. I'm like, I'm walking. Because I know this is like $1,500 set, $2,000. $700. He goes, are you serious? He goes, I got $700 right here. I said, give me that money. He gave me the money. And when I came home without golf clubs. Vicky's like, where's all your clubs? I'm like, I sold them. Sold my clubs for $700. Take this money and go buy yourself something. But I just dropped it. Is there anybody here that you go all in on stuff and then you just drop it like it's nothing out of nowhere? Is there anybody else in here like that? Please raise your hand. Like you can go all in and you can also, spend thousands of dollars, and then you're just like one day you're done. When we start chapter 12, that's how this is going for Jesus. We've got people who are all in 100%. They're going to be worshiping to the Lord, crying out to him. And by the end of the chapter and also the end of this gospel, it's those same people that are so into Jesus, so all in 100%, are going to just drop him like he never existed. And so we got just a few passages, short verses here in John chapter 12. Let's start in verse 1. The scene is there's a dinner party for Lazarus. the guy Jesus just rose from the dead, at a man's house named Simon the leper. So they are in Bethany, but they are not at this time at Mary, Martha, and Lazarus' house. They're at a guy named Simon the leper's house. And they are there to celebrate this new life in Lazarus at the time of the Passover. And so it says in chapter 12, verse 1, then 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus, who was raised from the dead, whom he raised from the dead, and there they made him a supper, and Martha served, but Lazarus was one who sat at the table with him. So it's 6 days to the Passover. And have you ever watched YouTube and like you highlight over the time bar at the bottom, and it'll tell you how much time you got left in the video? That's what John's doing with you now. He's like, here's the time marker, 6 days, and he's going to the cross. And John spends 50% of his gospel touching on just the last 7 days of Jesus' life on earth. And you got to ask yourself the question, why does he spend so much time on so few days? And it's because this is the greatest 7 days that the world has ever seen. This is the 7 days in which man will be redeemed. The sin problem has been fixed, and the Redeemer has come and gave his life on the cross for our sins. It was, all throughout history, they were wondering, how is God going to fix the sin problem between man and God? How could he just forgive rebellion? How could he just forgive the murderer, the lustful, the sinner, the thief? How could he do it? How could he just say you're forgiven and still be a righteous God? Because, like we've said before, if you go to court and then the judge simply dismisses a murder case to a family member and they say, he's forgiven, you're going to cry out what? Injustice, unjust judge. You can't just forgive. There must be a price and a penalty. And it was in those 7 days that price and that penalty and that contract was paid in full, where it was the righteous for the wretched. And it's not fair. It's grace. And that's why when you're looking at the rest of this gospel, and there's all these other chapters, it's spent on just 7 days. Now, how many of you guys like having dinner parties? Anybody? You guys like having people over, making dinner? Really? Okay. Other of us are like, don't come, don't call. So they're having a dinner party at Simon the leper's house. And you can picture it. Martha is doing what she always does. She's serving. She's got the hot poppers, the hot wings, the hors d'oeuvres, and everybody's there having a good time. Probably got smooth jazz on Roku, and they're all hanging out, and it's this just epic party. Jesus loved to hang out and have a good time. And he's with his friends, and it says that Martha was there serving, which is interesting because you guys remember the last time you saw Martha in Luke's gospel, and she was in the kitchen and she was serving. You remember her attitude? And she was mad because her sister is sitting there doing nothing while she's doing all of the work in the kitchen. So what's that look like? She's in there banging pots and pans, slamming doors, and then tells Jesus, you need to tell Miss Thing to get in here and help me because I'm doing all the work, and she's out there drawers slam, dropping dishes. Get her in here. And what did Jesus say to her? She's chosen what's best. She was worshiping at the Lord's feet. And so now you see her and she's got a different attitude. And it's because she's learned from that situation how to turn her work into worship. And you know what? We can do the same thing because sometimes we look at work like work, but we can actually turn it into worship and be stoked about it. How many times people you guys, when you're cleaning your room, check this out, if that ever happens, you can do it like an act of worship. Yeah, you can totally clean your room, your house, your yard. You can go to work, and if you're not getting paid extra, because some people are like, if I'm not getting paid extra, then I ain't touching it. But it can be an act of worship. Everything that we do can be an act of worship to the Lord. And so when this girl, she's working now, and she's stoked doing it. She's got a good attitude about it. And I started comparing those two sisters, Mary and Martha. And they're so different because Martha, you never really see her being affectionate. And Mary, she's like overly affectionate. She's like clingy, can't get rid of her. She's always hanging around Jesus's feet and just like all over the place. And I started thinking about it, how different we're wired. And chances are you're married to someone who is either unaffectionate, and then one is like super affectionate. You guys know which one that is in my relationship. I'm like totally affectionate. Vicky's like a statue. She's just kind of, it's like when I hug, I love her, but it's like I'm hugging a robot. It's like, and I got to program it. Reciprocate love back, right? It's just, she's kind of that, she's built that way. And some of us are built that way where we're really affectionate. Some of us are not. And I started thinking about that in worship. Some of us, when it comes to worship, we're really like emotional. And then others of us are kind of like not so much. It's like in some places or churches you go to, as soon as the first string of that guitar hit, boom, their hands are up, right? They're clapping, they're all emotional. And then others of us are looking at them like, am I broke? Like, how come, how come I'm not raising my hands? How come I'm not clapping? Well, you're just built different. And that's okay too. And you got to remember to worship your way. And that's what's important, right? And so don't feel bad if you like look around, someone's clap. You shouldn't be looking around anyway, but it's like, don't feel bad if you're not overly emotional. It doesn't mean that Martha loved him less. She just loved him different. So Martha is there cooking the dinner, and it says in verse 3, then Mary took a pound of costly oil, spikenard, anointed the feet of Jesus, wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of oil. I bet you like 70 years later, John remembers what this smells like. But one of the disciples, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, said, who would betray him, was this fragrant oil not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor? This he said, not because he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief, and he had the money box and used to take whatever was in it. And then in verse 7, it says, Jesus said to her, let her alone, for she has done this for my burial. For the poor you have with you always, but me you will not have always. And so Mary, you got to picture the scene. There's like 15 guys laying on their side, eating, the food is in front of them, which you guys know because you studied this. But they're on their side reclining all around this dinner table. And they're eating and having a good time. And then Mary comes up and she starts doing something really weird. It says that she comes up and she dumps a bottle size of water, perfume all over his feet. And then she starts drying it with her hair. Now, they're not saying it, but they're thinking it. This is unusual. Like, this is not normal. And the amount of the perfume, this is like extravagant. The amount of that perfume was like $50,000 today. You know how you guys go to Walmart and you think you can get you something real nice, like some Axe body spray or Old Spice? It wasn't like that. It was expensive perfume that she poured out on Jesus. You guys know I love cologne. I love it. I've always loved it. Even when I was young, I don't know why. I'm into it. It's one of my things. Like if you go into my bathroom, it looks like Parfumania at the mall. It's just gnarly. I get fragrances all the time, and I love to give them out too. Like if someone stinks, I'm just like, check this out. I feel this is your line. Like you're going to wear this great. And when the grandbabies come over, I hose them down. I bring them in the bathroom. I just and I send them out. But just love it. I just love the cologne and the fragrance of it. And so Mary, this act of worship costed her a lot, $50,000. I started thinking about when we studied 2 Samuel, and you guys remember when worship cost something. It was David. You remember that Jebusite Araunah that was going to give David property? And David's like, I'm going to buy it. Like my worship, my sacrifice shall cost me nothing. Like I'm going to go all in on this and give a dollar amount. And the reason why we look at this is that when it comes to giving, and I think this is important, but true worship is always going to require a personal investment. And if right away you're like, oh, is he hitting us up for money? No. But it is going to cost something. You know, it's going to cost you time to get up early, worship the Lord, right? It's going to cost you some aching backs to help out at the church. It's going to cost you money when you're giving and tithes and offering, because it requires, real worship does require a personal investment. If you're here and you're just soaking everything up and it's like there's nothing given back, it's like that's not worship. And so she pours it out, and it's different. I mean, how many dinners have you guys gone to and somebody done this? It's like Vicki and I have been to dinner. We've gone to dinner at people's houses and ain't nobody poured this over my feet and started doing this. Like, this is definitely unusual. And so Judas is there. And Judas, this is the last straw for Judas, because he sees this as a complete and total waste. You know, for him, he's been following Jesus for 3 years, and he's got nothing to show for it. And he's tired of hearing about how Jesus is going to go to the cross, there's going to be a burial, all of this stuff. And he's done, because he wants Jesus to be what? A king on earth. Because by association, he'll be rich, and he'll be rich too because of his connection to Christ. So all this burial, sacrifice stuff is just like, I'm done with it. I'm not doing this anymore. And he's like fed up. And this is the last straw for Judas when he sees this gift that she pours out on him. And he's mad, not because it went to the poor, but because it didn't go in his pocket. And what's interesting about this is that when you've got a greedy heart, all worship is going to look like a waste. He's like, this is completely wasteful. And what's interesting, when he didn't get money for this perfume by selling it, he goes and he sells Jesus out right after this, because he's got to have the money. Because when you've got a greedy heart, worship looks like a waste. And there's two things I saw with it. Number one is that, when people are greedy, what we give looks like a waste. Whether it's time, whether it's talents, whether it's our treasures, it looks like a complete waste. But you know what? Look what's happening here. The kids down there are getting a solid foundation in Christ. We're growing together. There's no waste in worship. And then two, instead of focusing on the worship, which Judas didn't do it, he went to criticizing it. And we got to be careful about criticizing worship. When we're worshiping here, sometimes people are like, and I guess it's not anybody here, but a common thing in churches is criticizing the worship that happens. It's too loud. It's not loud enough. Didn't we play that song 2 weeks ago? What's this electric guitar business? They're not hitting the bridge right. It's not happy enough. It's just not serious enough. They're not singing hymns. They're not singing Michael W. Smith. It's like you don't ever get out of the criticism. And here's the problem with that. Where's your focus? You're missing out. It's not about if we're hitting the chorus on time. It's, are you worshiping and connecting to the Lord? Are you sitting here criticizing, or are you worshiping? And it's easy, Judas looks at her and he starts criticizing her for her worship and judging her on it. But I want to encourage you guys, when we're doing worship, and by the way, another announcement, we're starting Wednesday night Bible study, 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock, that's right. 6 o'clock. And so we're going to be doing worship Wednesday nights and stuff too. And just remember, you're here to worship, not to be entertained and not to criticize. And Judas is like, sees the worship, and instead of worshiping, he starts criticizing. And you know what the Lord said? He said, "Shut up, you stupid tool." It's in the Greek. But he takes her side, right? It's like, hey, listen, keep your mouth shut and leave her alone. Because the Lord doesn't like the critique of worship. He loves worship. And so, in verse 9, as we're going, verse 9 says, "Now a great many of the Jews knew that he was there, and they came not for Jesus' sake only, but also that they might see Lazarus, whom he raised from the dead. But the chief priests plotted to put Lazarus to death, because on account of him, many of the Jews went away and believed in Jesus." So, back in the day, it was kind of like when you lived in a house, it was kind of like an open door thing. People could just walk by and look into your house and see what's going on. Nosy neighbors. Kind of reminds me of Vicky. If the neighbors are out there fighting, she'll peek up in the window. And what's funny is our dog gets right up alongside of her too. And they're both like, if you're driving down by our house and our neighbors happen to be fighting at this particular time and looked at my house, you got Vicky looking out and the dog looking out. And they're like wondering what's going on. And I've got to beat her down with a broom. I'm like, just get down off the couch. This is crazy. Don't let nobody see. No, I'm just kidding. I don't have to beat her with a broom. But she is looking out there with the dog. And it was kind of one of those things where they would be walking by the house and they're looking in and they're seeing Lazarus there. People are seeing Lazarus. And why is it weird that he's there? Because he was dead. And they're walking by and they're like, "Hey, Mary, isn't that Lazarus?" And Mary's like, "Yes, Hezekiah." "Well, wasn't he dead?" Yes, Jedediah. I mean, I can't, how many Amish names can I come up with? But it's like, yes, it's him. And so they're there and they're just like amazed at Lazarus. Now, you're like, "Jason, is there a point in that?" And I'm glad you asked those questions, because there is. This guy never wrote a book. He never passed out tracts at Walmart. He never had a killer worship song. In fact, how many words do we have of Lazarus in the scriptures? That's right, 0. But you know what? People came to see what the Lord did in him. And I thought about that, and I thought, you know what? That's pretty cool. Because all we got to do is be alive in the Lord and let people see not what I've done for him, but what he's done for me, what he's done for me in my life, in my family's life, in your life. How cool is that? You don't got to beat the streets. You don't got to be in competition with the Jehovah's Witnesses. I heard a funny story about that, by the way. This lady, they knocked on, and this is a true story, they knocked on this lady's door who was just a Christian, loved the Lord, knew her word. And they were trying to pass their garbage, and she's like, "Oh, honey, you don't believe that, do you?" And they said, "Absolutely, ma'am. We're standing on business. This is the truth." And she goes, "Oh, okay. Well, give me a minute. Let me get my jacket, because I'm going to follow you to every house that you go to and make sure everybody knows this ain't the truth." And I think that's just hilarious. But you know what? We don't got to go banging on the doors. What you do need is just, "Hey, here I am. The Lord's done it, and he's doing it." And I thought that was pretty cool about Lazarus. It's not about what we've done for the Lord, because Lazarus did nothing. It's about the Lord raising that man up from the dead and giving him new life. Giving him new life. Just kind of roll, just do life in the Lord and let people see it. So now as we close, there's 2 scenes, right? There's the supper party, and then there's the triumphal entry. And so now the scene changes, and we're just going to take 4 verses out from here, probably 5 maybe. But now the scene has changed from the supper to this triumphal entry. Verse 12, "The next day a great multitude that had come to the feast, when they had heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem, took branches of palm trees and went out to meet him and cried out, 'Hosanna, blessed he is come in the name of the Lord, the King of Israel.' And Jesus, when he had found a young donkey, sat on it, and as it was written, 'Fear not, daughter of Zion. Behold, your king is coming, sitting on a colt.'" Interesting way to roll into town on a Passover, on a colt. Jesus is coming in at the time where there's 250,000 lambs being sacrificed. You know what? And after this, these Passovers are never going to be the same again. The temple veil is going to rip in half. And the sacrifices are going to change after this one sacrifice. Jesus rolls into town and they're ripping up landscaping. They're just going crazy. They're pulling out trees from the root and shaking branches all over the place and screaming. It's kind of like some kind of crazy Taylor Swift concert. They're just yelling, Hosanna. And you know what? They're praising the Lord and he accepted it, which is interesting because you remember every time someone would go to do it, he'd be like, hey, let's keep this on the low because this is not my hour. But now the hour's come. Now he accepts the worship. Now he's riding in on a donkey. How do we know that Jesus didn't come in there ready to just start knocking heads together? You know, there's two types of people, the hammer and the nail. How do we know he didn't come in ready to knock heads? He's on a donkey. That's kind of not intimidating. You go to a petting zoo, I'm just going to, hey, let me saddle up on this thing. I'm going to come into town, my feet dragging. It's different. Sign of peace. Because when a general would come in to conquer, it'd be a white stallion with swords and shields, not dragging your feet on a donkey. And he comes in there, and he's accepting the worship. And I always remember, he came as a lamb the first time. But the second time is going to be a lion. And they're worshiping Jesus and they're crying out to him. And you know how fickle people are. One minute they love you, the next minute they hate you. And so it says, verse 16, his disciples didn't understand these things at first, but when Jesus was glorified, then they remembered these things that were written about him, that they had done these things to him. And so therefore the people who were with him, when he called Lazarus out of the tomb and raised him from the dead, bore witness. For this reason, the people also met him, because they heard that he had done these signs. And then the Pharisees then said amongst themselves, you see that you are accomplishing nothing. Look, the whole world has gone after him. I told you those guys didn't get along. The Sadducees and the Pharisees were like Democrats and Republicans. These guys did not jive. And now they're turning on each other. Look, what are you guys doing? They're blaming each other. You guys are getting nowhere. Whose fault is it? We've done everything we can do. We've made every accusation we can make. But there's going to be a setup. We're accomplishing nothing. And so now the story, as we pick it up on Wednesday night, is going to move into more of a setup. And I don't want to go into it too much, but, I will say this. It makes me happy when people who don't love the Lord and hate him see him winning. I dig that. Accomplishing nothing, you haters. And we see it online, right? This thing with Charlie Kirk. I was, when they did the funeral, and I was watching all those thousands of people worshiping the Lord. They had Brandon Lake leading. And that's all the girls' Christian crush, of course. But he's leading worship, and man, it was just beautiful. It was so cool. And I started thinking about a few years ago, how different it is that you see people coming together, glorifying and honoring the Lord instead of burning down buildings, tearing up cars, shooting people. It's like, what a difference. And they hate it. They hate it. They hate the worship. They hate the movement. They just, they don't want to look at it. And to me, I like that. I like that. I'm the type of, I used to be, I don't golf anymore. I told you guys that, right? But when someone would hit a bad shot, I would, in my heart, my mouth, I would say, that's too bad. You had a great swing. But I'm thinking, I just gained on you. I'm going to get up on you right here. But, To see people winning, to see Christians in the Lord winning in this time is beautiful. And I want to leave you guys with this thought. Worship team, come on up. As we take communion, the Lord's winning. Breakthroughs are happening. Lives are getting restored. And I'd love to see it. And also, too, I want to remind you guys, when we're worshiping, and think about this when you go home, what's the worth of your worship? Like, does it cost you anything at all? Anything. Anything. A visit to someone's house, getting up early in the morning, giving in the offering to continue the rebuilding, serving. Or, do you sit back and you're just like, nah, it's just going to cost me nothing. That's a Judas mentality. And man, we've got such a good God, you guys. We're going to celebrate that right now in a closing of a worship song. We're going to take communion. We're going to thank him for these last 7 days that we're going to study, for the greatest event in all history where we were redeemed by the blood of the Lamb when we deserved judgment. It's not fair. It's not fair that a judge would pardon and just say you're forgiven. And that's why the judge became a man and said, you know what? Someone's going to pay. It'll be me. And I'll take the sins and we'll go to the cross together that way. And that's what we celebrate this morning. So would you stand with me as we close in this last worship song? And Philip's going to lead us in communion.